The Dr. Melissa Show and the Stories That Shape Us is sponsored by CNY Mental Health Counseling. I can't think of a better guest for our first episode than Christine Phillips. After spending a decade as a teacher, Christine transitioned to her role as the practice and partnership manager at CNY Mental Health Counseling. Not only is she my colleague, but she's also become a dear friend. Christine is a rare disease mom, a caregiver, and someone who navigates an unimaginable level of uncertainty with grit, love, and a sense of humor that I deeply admire. Christine and her husband, Matt, live in Fayetteville, New York with their two daughters, Emmy, who's 5, and who has CASK gene mutation, and Andy, 3, who is neurotypical. There is no clear roadmap for Emmy's condition, no way to predict what tomorrow might look like. And yet Christine and Matt wake up each day and do what parents do. They love, they adjust, they fight for their daughter, and they do their best to create a life where Emmy and their younger daughter, Andy, both feel seen and cherished. Today, Christine is sharing her story, not just about Emmy's diagnosis, but about what it means to be a mother when motherhood looks nothing like you expected, what it means to carry the weight of caregiving while also raising a typical child, what it means to redefine success, to advocate, to love fiercely, and to find joy in places you never thought to look. And because this episode aligns with National Rare Disease Day, there is no better time to open up this conversation about the realities that so many families live with, but don't always get a chance to talk about. So let's dive in. Thank you, Christine, for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
So let's get to it. Why don't we share the story about how we came together? So Christine is the practice manager for my mental health counseling practice, which, has grown tenfold over the last several years, thanks in big part to her and the strengths that she brings. So Christine was my two kids, my son and my stepdaughter's 5th grade teacher.
Yes.
A few years ago at this point. And then I saw a post that you put on a local Facebook group.
Yeah. So as I was ending the last school year, I realized that teaching wasn't going to fit with my family anymore. And we can get more and more into that later. But I really was kind of grasping at straws. I'd been looking for a few months for a position that allowed me to be where I needed to be for my family, but also still contribute financially to my family. And so, I eventually decided to just put it out there. And so I put out a post on the local pages and on my own personal page and hoped that maybe somewhere, somehow I would find some sort of a connection that I already had or a lead. And it worked out. It actually worked out a few times, but the main direction that I ended up going was with Melissa. And so I started out at Melissa's practice as a partnership manager, so dealing with our different partnerships that we have within the practice and the community. And over time, it's just kind of grown and evolved. And now I'm sort of leading the practice in a variety of different facets, alongside, the rest of my admin team. That's incredible. And it's just been really fulfilling and also flexible for what I need. So it's been a godsend, really.
So tell us more about that. What made it so that you needed to leave teaching after a decade? And I know, knowing you personally, that was such a passion of yours. And I mean, when I saw your Facebook post, I was in a West Virginia hotel room with my son at a soccer tournament. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, buddy, you loved Mrs. Phillips as a teacher, right? And I mean, when you get an endorsement from a kid, from a 12-year-old boy who had you 3 years ago, I mean, that was the best recommendation that I think I've ever gotten for any employee that I've ever hired. So it was let's see what'll happen because of you. So tell us more about you. What was it that led you ultimately to need this shift for your family and knowing that teaching was not a profession despite your love and passion and strength in doing it, but you needed the change?
Yeah. So my daughter, Emmy, is 5. She was diagnosed in utero with spina bifida. So we knew right from the beginning that she was going to have a disability. Right from the beginning, we really shifted our mindset from we're going to have this typical child like most other people that we know to we're going to have a child who has, additional medical needs, and will need extra appointments and surgeries and things like that. So we've always known this,
and that's at that genetic ultrasound, right?
Yeah,
where they're measuring things.
Yep, the 20-week ultrasound.
20 weeks.
Yeah,
okay.
The 20-week ultrasound. So we decided to go to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and pursue fetal surgery, where they would repair her spine in utero. The idea there being that less nerve damage would happen while she was still growing within the womb. So that was kind of the point, and we thought in doing so we were giving her the best possible chance, and we truly were, for mobility purposes, for brain health, just all sorts of holistically giving her a really good shot. So,
but what was that like? I mean, for you and your husband, I mean, this is your first child. It sounds like the pregnancy up to that 20 weeks was quote unquote normal,
yes.
Right? So what did you expect up to that point? What did you expect the pregnancy? I mean, we all have these visions of what it's all going to be like. And almost for nobody, it ends up being that way,
right.
But it doesn't stop us from fantasizing.
It was like literally the easiest pregnancy, the first 20 weeks. So simple. I was never sick. I had a really good friend who was also pregnant. We were due about the same time, and she was sick like all the time. So I just felt so lucky the entire pregnancy, like going along it alongside her. And so I quite literally like got a phone call while I was teaching right before I went to pick up my kids from their library class. And all that I heard was that her brain and spine was misshapen and there was something wrong with her skull. And
so somebody's delivering that message to you
right over the phone,
right over the phone.
So I remember just being a mess and trying to hold it together long enough to get out the door. And then, we did some additional testing and stuff, but we really didn't know for like a week. And that was the hardest part.
Absolutely. And those words, I think when anybody has a message, regardless of context, right? It's something about your child.
Right.
It's like this trauma moment that essentially takes all of the air out of the room.
Completely.
Like time stops.
Yep. And I remember just going to my teacher friend right next door and being like, I need to leave and I need your help figuring out how I'm going to do that. And I had really supportive colleagues at the time, thank goodness, because I just couldn't. Like,
absolutely,
that was so like traumatizing. So it was over a week before we really even found out, or just about a week before we found out what was even going on. So at that point, all we knew was that, things are misshapen, things don't look right. And so we're going through this constant cycle. I remember sitting on the couch with our dogs that weekend, watching basketball on TV and just going through this constant cycle of, okay, one of three things is going to happen. It's going to be wrong, and everything's going to be
like
fine.
A false positive.
Right. Or our child, there's something wrong with our child, but we'll be able to figure it out. Or our child's not going to make it. And we really didn't know through that whole weekend, like what was going to happen. We didn't have any information. So I honestly think, like, all in all, that was probably the hardest part of every bit that we've gone through with Emmy, is that really not knowing for a period of time. And that ends up being a trend through the first 2 years of her life, is really a lot of not knowing. But not knowing if she was going to live, I think, was the hardest. But also at the same time trying to rationalize, okay, we're still young, we have time, we'll try to figure things out. We aren't the only people that have to deal with bad things. I just remember trying to rationalize that all weekend too.
Yeah. Did you do it yourself? Did you and Matt talk about it?
Just Matt and I talked about it, really. We just kind of vegged all weekend and just talked and tried to process through things together. It really was a really bonding moment for us in a sense. He was really my rock that whole weekend.
I imagine it's like being in a bubble. You know, it's like this is happening to the two of you.
And no one
else knows.
Right.
They don't really get it. And even if you were to tell people, they don't understand the gravity of the whole thing.
Yeah, we told our parents, and I think that was pretty much it at that point. And I'm sure that they were going through very similar things to us that weekend, the control, not having control to help your kids and that kind of thing. But yeah, it really was just kind of in a bubble. I actually, to this day, have memories pop up on Facebook from that weekend that are just hanging out with the dogs and watching basketball with Matt. This is one step at a time, something like that. And I know what that was about. Yep. Even though nobody reading it did.
What happens to you when you see that come up? What do you feel?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily feel anything in particular, other than just flashbacks sort of to that time, memories of that time. But I think we've really processed and dealt with it at this point. So it's maybe even just pride for kind of being there for each other through that.
Oh, I love that.
I think it's more of a positive thing when I see it these days.
Where it's we've gotten through, look at us now.
Yeah. We did this. We made it through that.
Yeah.
So, so it was a lot of unknown for a while, but I did end up going to Philadelphia and having fetal surgery, and then had to stay totally separated from my house, my dogs, my kids,
By kids, I mean students.
But that's what it felt
that's
like
exactly
to you.
what
You
it
had
felt
to
like.
leave.
Yes.
And I remember, I mean, you've shared a little bit about this story with me before. And I remember you saying you had no idea, like when you left and you went to Philadelphia, you thought you'd be coming back.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought I told my students, I was teaching 4th grade at the time, and I said, I'll be back. I'll be back Friday. I'll see you in class on Friday. But when I got down there,
I'll be gone for a week.
No, like 2 days.
Oh, okay.
Like the plan was like 2 days. But when we got down there and found out that we were candidates for the surgery, we also found out that the surgery had to happen on Friday or it couldn't happen at all. And this was on Wednesday.
Wow.
So there was no leaving. I was there for the next 10 weeks on bed rest after having surgery. And it was a lot. Like Matt had to come back and forth to Philadelphia. I had 11 different people that came down and took care of me because I wasn't allowed to be alone at all. I had to be within a half hour of the hospital at all times. It was
You didn't
a lot of
stay
risk.
in the hospital.
No, I was at a Ronald McDonald House.
You're at a Ronald McDonald
which
House.
was
Wow.
incredible. Yeah, they were incredible.
And they provided care for you.
They provided a room and meals really
Okay.
was the main thing, and some entertainment and stuff, but I couldn't really partake in a lot of it at the time. But they allowed 11 different people to come down and stay at the house with me at different times throughout the next 10 weeks.
Did
which was
you have
really
to
great.
organize all that? Like, did you have to
Yes.
think through, okay, who
Yeah.
and like, how did you do that?
Yeah. So I can remember the night before surgery, I woke up at 1:30 in the morning and I was wide awake. And I remember I was actually, or maybe it was 2 nights before, I was actually sharing a hotel room with my parents because we were trying to save all of Matt's vacation days and
Yeah.
time off
Yeah.
because he didn't have a lot at that time with that job.
Oh, and there's so much unknown in that
So
too.
much,
where I'm sure
so much. And then obviously
Yeah.
he wanted to be able to spend some time with his child after they were born too. So
And
my
take care of
parents
you.
actually took me down. Yeah, my parents took me down for the initial evaluation. Matt came down for surgery, but I remember waking up and I was sharing a hotel room with my parents and they were asleep and I didn't want to wake them up, but I was way too anxious and just wired at that point. So I remember sitting down on the floor next to the hotel bed with my laptop, writing out subplans, making a entire spreadsheet of
None of this
This is where
surprises
it
me.
starts, right? This is where it starts.
Yes.
Making an entire spreadsheet of a calendar for the next 3 months and getting ready to try to figure out who could be with me when and who can I ask to cover this time and that time. And my parents were huge in it. They both took a good chunk of time off and came down for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
So my mom would come for a week and then my dad would come the next week. And so they sacrificed a lot, being away from each other for 2 weeks to be able to take care of me. And they're attached at the hip. So I know that was huge for them.
It's such an incredible thing though, because you're
Crazy.
essentially taking inventory of the people in your life.
Yes.
Who are those close people that you really can ask to step in, to step up for you in
Yeah.
such a personal and vulnerable way. I actually was reading this thing just the other, I was listening to the Oprah podcast and she had Esther Perel on, and Esther was talking about this whole, a pandemic of loneliness, essentially, and this disconnect that people have where you may have all of these friends, all of these people that you know in your life, but you don't really have anyone to get your mail when you're on vacation, or you don't have anyone to feed your cat, or, you don't have anyone that you can ask to come and sit at the Ronald McDonald's house with you when you're in this incredibly life-changing moment. And what an incredible thing.
So lucky to have that. So my best friend since I was 5 came a couple different times. She actually had to move me out of a rental house to the Ronald McDonald House. The poor girl. I remember throwing up in her car because I was still sick from the surgery and the anesthesia. And she moved all of my stuff and she took care of me so well. And then my best friend from college came and my cousin and my parents and my husband's parents and my brother-in-law and just all of these people just kind of rallied around us and came and helped. And that's really what we needed. And then we had a couple of friends back home who stayed with our dogs whenever Matt came down because we had 2 dogs too, and took care of our house and helped plow the driveway when there was ice storms. And so we really just had a whole crew of people who were just so supportive, and we could not have done it without all of them. But also we knew we were going to figure out a way to make it work because that's what we thought was best.
And that doesn't happen in a vacuum. I don't think that when people get when trauma happens, right? It doesn't just happen and then all of a sudden people start showing up. These are friendships that you must have invested in over the course of time before any of this happened.
Right.
Right. So it's even, I think, to that point of it's the depth of your connections that you have in the support system anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
the foundation.
really important. And we couldn't have done it without all of that.
Yeah.
So grateful for all of it. And then once Emmy was born, she was still in the hospital for 4 weeks afterward. And we had to make the choice after like 5 days to send Matt back home to work. So anyone who's had a C-section knows you're not supposed to drive for 8 weeks. But I was driving after about 4 days back and forth from Philly to Jersey.
Wow.
Every day. First thing in the morning, last thing at night, spending all day at the NICU.
So she was in the
she
NICU
was in Philadelphia.
in Philadelphia,
NICU.
and you were in New Jersey?
Yeah, I was in Camden. So right across the river. It was only like depending on traffic, 15 to 25 minute drive. But I would do it twice a day. I'd go in at like 6 a.m. before shift change and leave at about 7:30 after shift change, and figuring out, pumping and my own eating and all of that on top of it. Just back and forth every single day of the week for about almost 3 weeks by myself before we were able to come home. And then Matt came down and got us, and home we went.
I'm like, how did you do this? Like,
I don't know. I really don't know.
Did it.
We just did it. Yeah. I remember at one point the manager at the Ronald McDonald House calling me and being like, "Are you still living here?" Because she wasn't seeing me anywhere. And I was like, "Yeah, we had the baby early," because she was born about 2 weeks before she was actually supposed to, which was early on its own. But yeah, she wasn't seeing me because she worked the day shift, and I was gone before she got in the morning, and I didn't come back until she got back. So
you would spend the day at the NICU.
I'd spend the whole day at the NICU. Yeah.
With Emmy.
Just doing as much momming as I could do, like being whatever level of mom I could be while she was there. And I remember like they had, they called it an angel cam, I think. So they had a camera on her at all times in the NICU. So I could log into an app and see what she was doing and see if she was awake or sleeping. I could also call in at any time. So when I'd wake up in the middle of the night to pump for her, I'd pull up the video and I'd watch her sleep. And sometimes I'd call in and talk to the nurses and see how she was doing. And my dad would often look at it, and then he would harass me about the headbands that I put on her head because they would be like covering her eyes. He'd be like, "You better call those nurses and tell them to fix the headband."
I love that.
But he's just, he's always harassing me, trying to find ways to make me laugh. So that was his way of kind of picking me up in those moments. But I mean, I talk about it now like it was all this like moment of strength and all of that. And a lot of it was, but there was absolutely huge breakdowns during the time. I remember a week that my mom was with me, the TV wasn't working. We didn't have TVs in the room. And so we bought a TV, like a smart TV to plug in and be able to have TV. Because I'm confined to this little room for weeks.
Right.
And I don't even watch very much TV. And you would have thought that like someone just like killed my puppy or something. I was so upset this TV wasn't working. I was like hyperventilating. I remember being like, why can't anything go right? To the point where my dad nearly drove down to fix the TV from 5 hours away because he was like, someone needs to fix this for her.
Yes. And it's that element of control when it's like, I just need to be able to do something to help from your dad's perspective.
Yes.
From you, I mean, that's displacement.
Yep.
Right? Which is like this defense mechanism in psychology that people, it's like you move the target that you're really upset about and struggling with onto something else, symbolically like shift it over because you can't do anything with the thing that you're really upset about and struggling with.
Yep.
You can do something with this stupid TV.
Yes.
Right. But that's incredible that you remember even.
Yeah. And Matt talks to this day about how my dad called him at like 5:30 that morning, and the two of them talked and problem solved. Like, what are we going to do about this TV? Like, who's going to go down? What are we going to do to fix this? Like, we need to make sure we're taking care of Christine. Like the two of them really kind of banded together, I feel like, in that instance, and worked really hard together. Matt and my parents did to make everything work out for me. But my mom ended up getting a different TV, and it worked eventually.
You had like 18 TVs in that room at that point.
Like no TV afterward, other than some Redbox movies with my dad when he came down. No, it had nothing to do with the TV.
Right.
But I just remember sobbing about the TV. So
you recognize that now. You connect that now.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious.
Right? But then in that moment, what? I mean, I imagine you didn't have that insight.
No, not at all. It was just this constant feeling of nothing can go right. Like, why does this keep happening to me? What did I do to deserve all of this? What did my unborn child do to deserve all of this? Haven't we been through enough? Like, just this cycle of despair and not understanding. And that part was just like really hard. But I feel like those moments were semi-few and far between. I don't know, maybe the people around me feel differently. But when I look back at it, it feels like there was a couple of moments over those like 4 months of time, because I went in January and I came back in May. So over that span of time, it feels to me like there was a few moments where it felt like that. And other than that, it really was drawing strength from the people around me. So the people who came to entertain me, and the doctors who were so positive and supportive, and the mental health counselor that my husband and I met with there at the hospital to talk through things and figure things out, who literally said, you need nothing other than a safe place for your child to sleep, some diapers, and your breast milk. And like, stop worrying about what you need at home, because you don't need anything at home.
Right.
Because I didn't get a baby shower. I didn't get any of those things, because I disappeared at the 22-week mark or whatever. So that was a big like stressor too. So for me, it was all about around the baby for the most part. Like, I'm not prepared. I'm a very obsessively prepared person. So not having that control was really, really hard.
Yeah, you had to essentially like relinquish all of it. Live in that level of uncertainty, which is huge. But it also sounds like one of the things that you recognize is that you were going through this grief process.
Yeah, completely. Definitely.
When you think about grief, right? People don't usually, it's a hard thing to wrap your head around. When we think about grief, oftentimes it's about someone has died.
Right.
Right. So you get what I'm talking about, it seems like. So what was that grief process for you?
So in this, it's so much more of like grieving the expectation, right? Like grieving what I thought motherhood was going to look like. And so for me, I think I weirdly accepted it very quickly, but I did that because I was able to find like Facebook groups of other moms who have kids with spina bifida and see their kids growing and thriving and doing great, and talk to them about what was going on. And I had a friend who was in England. I call her a friend. I've never met her. She lives in England, and our girls were set to be born around the same time. They had fetal surgery around the same time. And so we really leaned on each other a lot. I probably talked to her more than I did almost anyone during this process. And it just was really just so important, like, to have that community of people who truly get it.
Absolutely. You're in the same boat.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people who truly get it. And all of the people who were so supportive of us still couldn't get it. Not truly. They could empathize and be there, but they couldn't really understand. And I think in that moment, that's what we really needed, was people who could really understand.
Yeah.
So we really leaned I really leaned on those groups at that time. And it's actually really funny. I can go back still to this day to some of the groups and kind of like search my own name and see my first posts. And I'm so like offended by the things that I thought and said for my daughter, because I'll be like, we are so upset that our daughter is going to have this disability, and we don't understand why this is going to happen to us. And I'm like, you just put that. And everybody does. Every single new diagnosis comes to the groups and is like, we're really upset about this, blah, blah, blah. And now that and that's so natural, right? Because that is your reaction. You are upset. But now that I have all this lived experience in it, I look at the fact that that was my reaction, and I was like, that's so sad. Like, you were upset about Emmy. Like, you were upset about this girl that you like absolutely adore. And it's just so funny how your perspective changes. But again, that's grief. That's you starting with that absolute like fear of the unknown, and
it's actual denial, right? It's like,
completely.
I can't wrap my head around what this level of trauma means for me, the expectation that I would ever have for my future life. And you're grieving that future self, or even you're grieving the life that you thought that Emmy would have, you know, that you've made up in your head. And so the grief is actually about this loss of this future self that never existed. And until you go through that whole process, and where I see people getting really stuck, which is why I think it's so incredible for you to share your version of the story, is people who don't allow themselves to emotionally go through that experience. They block themselves off because it is painful. You know, even though you're recognizing those moments of despair where maybe you have those guttural sobs, and they weren't every day. They weren't overtaking you. It wasn't the majority of the way that you were experiencing this whole thing, but there were moments where you let yourself fall apart. Yeah. And there were moments when you let yourself sob. And there are moments where then you had to pick yourself back up and get to the NICU and take care of your daughter and mess with her headband. And it's that one step at a time, I think, that is so important for people to know, that even though it feels like you are 100% stuck in the bottom of this well, that it's just one step forward, letting yourself feel it the whole way, surrounded by people who can validate that in you and be there with you, and you get through it.
And part of it was this toxic positivity that I realized was that now, but I think that that's what gets you through it in those early stages of the diagnosis. Like, my kid's going to be the best kid with spina bifida ever. Like, no one's even going to know she has spina bifida. She's going to be so amazing, and we're going to do all these therapies, and she's going to be healed. And that's not realistic, obviously, but I can remember.
That's bargaining, though. In the grief process, that's bargaining. It's like, if she can have spina bifida, fine, but she's going to be the best version of it.
Yes, completely. And I, retrospect, you see all of that, but it's so, like, I literally laugh at my like initial posts and update posts to people on how she was doing and how I was doing, and we had weekly scans after her surgery. And so all of our scans being like, oh, well, her ventricles, because she was expected to have hydrocephalus. So her ventricles are measuring this and this today. Her ventricles are measuring this and this today. And once we got over 10 on one of them, I refused to post and tell people about it because it felt like defeat. And so then everybody's asking, like, how's Emmy? How are you guys doing? And I was like, didn't want people to know. At that point, it felt like a failure. And I'm like, that's not even like level of hydrocephalus yet. Like, it just was ridiculous. Like, how like in tuned and stuck on these numbers and this plan to be the best kid with spina bifida. Yeah, completely. And there's no control, but it's the place of trying to find that control. It's the thing that you're trying to keep under control for someone who's used to carrying so much control. So
it's like, if you just
really
figure
funny
it out
in retrospect.
Right. If you just power through, if you just figure it out, then it'll all make it better.
It'll be fine. Everything will be okay.
Right. So you can look back and laugh at these posts
Totally.
now. Do you have compassion and empathy for that version of yourself having going through such incredible trauma?
I think I see it most, or I feel it most, when I see other new parents getting the diagnosis.
Yeah.
I to be completely candid, I often read them and I like roll my eyes like, your kid's going to be fine. And then I'm like, oh wait, that was you too. Like, and that's when I kind of think about it. That's when I go back. And I think seeing all of the other parents on the pages, like, who I know have been through a bunch of crap like we have, right? Commenting on those new diagnosed people and just giving them reassurance and showing them the range of our kids and that kind of thing, and letting them know that everything's going to be okay. Despite, I know so many of them have the same visceral reaction that I do of like, why do you have to word it like that? Well, because we did too at one point. So I think that's when I have the most compassion for myself, is that kind of triggers it, like seeing the newly diagnosed people go through the same things and knowing that that's where I was. I think that's a place that really lets me reflect and feel that compassion.
So what do you think enabled you to shift that perspective from that, like really trying to just power through, control, like get the measurements that you wanted, right? Like feel that was almost like performance, and it was almost like a reflection on your worth, Emmy's worth, like how you were doing, to being more of like, wait a second, this is what is, right? This is something we have to accept and know we don't really know what's going to happen down the road. And it becomes more about you're like, everything will be okay. But it sounds like you really had to change the definition of what that meant and looks like for you and your family.
So that really started to show up when she was probably 4 or 5 months old, because she started rolling, and then all of a sudden, a few weeks later, she couldn't do it anymore. And she wasn't learning to sit the way we expected. And all of a sudden she wasn't eating very well. She was choking. And so things were like going awry sort of, and out of the expectation for spina bifida. And like I mentioned, the other friend that I had in England, like her daughter Eloise was doing all of these things. She was meeting her milestones or exceeding them, doing some of them early. And so were a lot of other people that I knew that had kids around the same time as us. And Emmy just wasn't. And I think that seeing that she wasn't the best kid ever with spina bifida, like I had to really kind of accept that. And I don't really know how I did it, to be honest. I think just realizing that there was more happening, that it wasn't just spina bifida, kind of forced us to take a hard look. But even at that point, we thought, well, if we can figure out what it is, then we can treat it and everything will be better.
There's always a treatment, right?
Right. There's always something we can do to make it better, was kind of the point or the thought, I guess. So we did eventually, when she was like 19 months old, I think, 20 months old, get an additional genetic diagnosis. She still at 20 months wasn't sitting, wasn't rolling again. Obviously no walking, standing, any of that. Not talking, no words. But we got an official diagnosis then of CASK gene disorder. And you'll notice, like, in your intro, like, we name Emmy as having CASK gene disorder. We hardly think of spina bifida anymore in our lives, because not only is she not the best kid with spina bifida, but it's also not the disability she has that impacts her the most. She did really great with that fetal surgery, and fetal surgery is not a cure by any means. The standard of care is still to do surgery after birth on spina bifida. And it doesn't like cure or fix anything, but it is supposed to preserve the nerves better. And it absolutely did that. We know that she has feeling and movement down to her toes that she shouldn't have. But all of that said, it also, kind of became a wake up call that, like, okay, she's not the best kid with spina bifida because she also has this other thing. And what is this other thing? So figuring that out, like, we don't even mention spina bifida really anymore. Right. I name her as a child who has CASK.
So tell us more about CASK and what it means to have a rare genetic disorder and what it means for you and your family.
So CASK is ultra rare. At the time of diagnosis, there was only like 180 people in the world known to have it. Now we're at 270, maybe a little more now. Last I checked, the numbers were 270. But it's, it's worldwide. There's a lot of kids in Europe, Germany, England, Ireland, Australia.
But 270 in the world is still very rare.
The most we know about are in the US. But there's only like 3 or 4 in New York State. So it's really, really rare. It's considered an ultra rare disorder. And basically what it is it's the CASK is a gene on the X chromosome. And so it impacts more females than males, because we have 2 X chromosomes and males only have 1. And so basically each kid's gene is really different too. Like where it cuts off and the exact like address of the gene basically is different. So it's very interesting. Every kid is very independent of one another. But what it does is it creates a protein in your brain that then works to help coordinate all of the signals that get sent to all the muscles in the body. That's kind of the very like bland version of it. I am not a scientist, so getting into that's about where I keep it.
What does it look like for you though? And for Emmy?
But so because her brain doesn't make enough or the right way of that protein, she can't coordinate anything really. She can't do anything motor-wise, sit, stand, talk. Sometimes she can hold her head up. Other times it's really difficult for her. She doesn't roll over still to this day. She'll be 6 in April, so just a couple of months away from 6. She can't talk. She can't coordinate talking. She can squeal and screech. So we always say that she is non-speaking. She is very verbal. She makes herself well known, especially when she's out at restaurants, if there's sports on TV. She let everybody at Tully's know the other night that she was there. But she also, she can't communicate very well. She can't play with toys. So she can't move her hands to make them do what she wants them to. So really, she can sit and be entertained. But she can also laugh, and she has a koala bear snuggle. She latches right on. Everyone at her school calls it Emmy's koala hug, and she is a great sleeper. That's something we've been blessed with, but she also has seizures and a lot of medical conditions. And because she doesn't have the strength, like the muscular strength, she gets a lot of, like when she gets a common cold, she can't fight it as easily and ends up in the hospital. And so it becomes a lot of hospitalizations and a lot of support and a lot of medical support, a lot of medications every day, a lot of medical treatments that we do right in the home. We joke all the time, but it's not really a joke, that her room is essentially a hospital room. And the only thing we don't have is the higher flow oxygen plugged into the wall. And I don't understand why they can't just install that for us. We would never have to go to the hospital if we had it. But
well, so walk me through that though. Like I know she's almost 6 now, but during those younger years when she was initially diagnosed with a gene disorder and you and Matt were navigating what this new information meant. And I know you spent a lot of time in the hospital and tried to navigate both of your work schedules and keeping everything afloat. You also had Andy.
Yes, eventually, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that, honestly, I think the CASK diagnosis was outside of like that weekend of not knowing what was wrong at all with our kid. The CASK diagnosis hit me harder than the rest of it. Because up until that point when she was almost 2 and we had an actual like diagnosis name, I still thought, oh, she might walk. Oh, she might. Yeah, she's still behind. She's really not sitting yet, but she might do it. I think we're just going to have to keep going with therapies and everything will be, it was still these rose-colored
We had to figure
glasses.
out more and then we'll get an answer.
Yeah,
and
once we get
happen.
an answer, it'll all be fine. And when we got the CASK diagnosis and we met with our neurogeneticist in Philadelphia, she explained like the level of intellectual disability and the lack of independence, and that some kids with CASK do walk and have some words, but there's no independence coming from this. And that's really what hit me, because all along our whole intent for her was to just set her up for as independent of a life as we possibly could. And then all of a sudden that was gone. And it was, we're never going to be retired and go explore the world. We're never going to, be empty nesters and all of these things. And not that was something I spent a lot of time thinking about in my mid-20s when this was going on, but it was like in that moment it became a realization that like, okay, again, I'm grieving something that I guess in the back of my head I've expected for my life way down the line. And I know now at 27 or whatever I was, that's not happening, 28 something, that's not going to happen. And that the only way that would happen is if something happens to my child. And I don't want that either.
Right.
So it was just this really big like loss in that moment of like, wow, we lost all of these plans again. Like, we planned for a typical child. We found out we were having one with spina bifida. So then we planned for a child with spina bifida. And then we found out that our child has CASK. So how do we plan for a child with CASK? And again, it was going back to those Facebook groups.
Yes.
And so literally on our genetic diagnosis paperwork, it says at the bottom, go to this group on Facebook for more information. And it's just a mom's group created by another CASK mom. But even our neurogeneticist in Philadelphia recognized that you're going to get the most information about this disorder from the people living with the kids with this disorder. Like, there is no research on it. If you looked it up right now, it tells you that males don't live at all and females can't walk, talk, eat, do anything. Mind you, I know several females who do walk. Actually, most of our friends who have kids with CASK, the girls can walk. And some of them even have words. And we have several friends with kids with CASK that are boys, that are teenagers, and another, a rare disease day born Graham. Like, he's one of our buddies. His mom was one of my biggest supporters at the time of diagnosis. They live right in Jersey. And he is doing really great. I mean, he deals with a lot of the same things as Emmy does, and he doesn't walk either, but he can walk in his skate trainer, and he's doing really well too, like even more motor wise than I would say Emmy is, for sure. So it's just such a range and whatnot, but those lived experiences, those people that have been there, are the ones that we turn to once again. And that is so important, to have people who really get it. And there wasn't this like, our families continued to be so supportive, but it was like, she'll be okay. But she, in a large sense of the word, like, she won't. Like, it's not the okay that you're talking about isn't the okay that's going to happen.
Well, and I see this all the time. It's like families are so well-intended, loved ones are so well-intended, but when something is really like very, very difficult, we call it trauma, right? Trauma does not just mean you were in a horrible car accident. Trauma is like, something that really disrupts your life. Like, it just puts a halt to what the normal expectation was. Those are traumas in people's lives. It's a much more broad definition than it ever was before. And a lot of times the person going through it is able to navigate in a much more effective way when the loved ones actually acknowledge the severity of it. And that creates such an incredible validation process, but that doesn't happen very much because the loved ones, like your parents, and I don't know them, but it's like, I imagine for them that it's like they had their own grief process that was going on.
Definitely.
And they felt so helpless selfless to be able to help you and Matt. And
they had sacrificed so much for the spina bifida side of things, and Matt's parents as well, like supporting us in so many ways. And then it's like, well, that didn't work. Like it did work, but it doesn't feel like it worked because there's still stuff. But I can totally see how that would be. Like, they want us to be okay.
Yes.
So they're trying to encourage that it's going to be okay, but it wasn't okay.
Right.
And it's still not okay.
And being able to find the words with people who really, truly got it and immediately reaching for those community resources.
Yes.
Even just the Moms Facebook group, right? Is not just the Moms Facebook group. That becomes your lifeline.
Exactly.
To knowing what life can look like. Okay, the expectation. Like, what I hear you saying too is that definition of what a successful life looked like was constantly being, turned upside down on its head,
changing,
requiring you to pivot, requiring you to take stock in what really mattered to you. I'm curious more about you and Matt, your relationship, how the two of you navigated that or continue to navigate that together.
Yeah. So right before Emmy turned 1 is when the pandemic hit. And so we spent like months 10, 11, and 12 of her life at home. Her first birthday party was over Zoom. And in a lot of ways, we really loved that. Like, we got to spend so much time together as a little family of 3. I just remember laughing. There was like 5 of us at my school who all had babies within like 3 months of each other. And I remember them all being like, oh my goodness, it's so hard. They're like all over the place and I'm trying to teach. And I'm like, I don't know, my kid stays right where I left her. Like, there's some benefits to this disabilities thing. But she, like, I just remember spending all of that time with her and so much cuddling and like love. And it was just so great, really, truly. But Matt and we actually moved during the pandemic as well. So we moved in May. And then shortly after we moved, we decided to start like couples therapy. And so at first we would do it virtually, because it was the pandemic. And I just know, like, Emmy would sit right there on my lap while we did this with our therapist. And it was really great. And at first it was a lot of like trauma, like processing and just going through all of it. So she was with us through, we started with her when Emmy was a year old and we didn't get her CASK diagnosis till she was older. So we started with like weekly therapy or bi-weekly at one point. And
what made you do it? Like, what made you actually make that call to say, hey, this is something we should really consider?
We were just really like, I think we were both exhausted and finding ourselves really short with one another and not communicating well. And like this breakdown of, we had this like great first couple of months of COVID, like all 3 of us, oh, this was great. But then as the world started to try to get back to normal, like there's more outside demands being placed on us. And then we're trying to juggle all the things and she's still not improving. And so there's those stressors and we just bought a new house and all this other stuff. And so I think it really was just kind of all of those things put together and we weren't as happy as we expected to be. And so we really wanted to kind of sort out, like, is this an us issue? Is this a diagnosis issue? Like, where is this from? We need to be our best us in order to be her best parents. And I think she really was the motivator for everything, truly.
Oh my gosh. If I could just like capture what you just said and put it like on a bumper sticker
on a billboard, right?
Yes. Yes. Because that's exactly it. In order for us to be the best us, say that again.
In order for us to be the best parents for her, we had to be the best like couple and the best individuals. And so we just realized that and decided, let's try it. So we did. And we've been with that therapist for over 5 years now, and we only see her once every 4 or 6 weeks now, but now it's like a monthly date night. Like we very intentionally, and this is my advice to like all rare disease parents, truly, and really everybody. I honestly tell it to a lot of people when they call for intakes for couples, but like I love using therapy night as a date night because it's built in, it's scheduled well ahead of time, and we just and then we go out to eat and it's just time together.
Well, and the other thing is that you didn't let it go so far so that you were both at this point of contempt, resentment, rage at each other. You didn't feel like the other one was failing you, right? It was, let's actually preemptively nip this in the bud so like that we can do the best.
Yeah, there's some stuff here that's coming up that's like not happy. And so let's try and figure this out because we know she needs us both.
Yes.
And if we keep going like this, then it might get worse and we don't want that.
Right.
So we did.
Your couples therapy allows you, and I know this from doing couples therapy as well, it allows you to also work on yourself.
Right, completely.
Right? And it's like you each are showing up as these individual people who have your own baggage about how you deal with
Yeah.
stress? What is your trauma response, like fight or flight, and how do you manage in those moments as a couple, like as two people who want to be on the same team?
Yeah. So I really think that therapy has evolved so much over the 5 years. Like, I think it started just kind of divulging all of the trauma and processing all the trauma that we'd been through with Emmy, and then turned into learning how to communicate. And we probably were stuck in the learning how to communicate for a very long time. We are just very different communicators. And so there needed to be we spent a lot of time on that. We both grew so much through there. And now we really use it a lot more as like a processing life. We come in and tell her what's going on in the last month and tell her about the most recent hospitalization and just process anything that we're going through as a couple. But generally speaking, like, it's laid such a positive foundation for us that we kind of know our roles within the relationship and within the family in a way that is flexible, but also really works for us. So that's been really great.
So when you and Matt are going through this now, right? Like, bring us more up to present day. And I know from working with you that it still is not easy, right? That there are still lots of hospitalizations, lots of uncertainty, trying to navigate your way through this.
Yeah.
Tell us more about what that looks like for you.
Yeah. So we brought Andy into the world when Emmy was almost 3. We knew we wanted her to have a sibling. We knew that there was chances of her also being disabled, but we didn't even bother with like an amnio because we knew that even if she was going to have a disability, it didn't matter. We were going to have her anyway because it felt like saying that she wasn't worth still having her would be like saying Emmy wasn't worth having. And it didn't matter. Like, at that point, it was just our life. So we brought Andy into the world. She has been wild as the day is long ever since. She's literally the craziest child I've ever met, but also the sweetest, most perfect sister.
Yes.
She has been around therapy and everything since day one. So she's always like helping her sister play and playing with her sister. When Emmy's upset, she goes up and tries to make her laugh by winking at her because that's Emmy's favorite sound. She just learned how to tell the Alexa how to play Emmy's favorite songs in her little toddler 3-year-old voice. So she really is like the best thing that we could have done for our family and also for Emmy. And she's that little piece of normal that we expected outside of this super crazy medical life. It's obviously harder having 2 kids to have to manage with vastly different like needs and desires. Yes. But it's been the best thing that we've done. And so we brought her obviously into the world 3 years ago. And that's really kind of when Emmy started getting sick and getting a lot of hospitalizations. Up to that point, she had a lot of surgeries. She had 8 surgeries before Andy was born. She's had 2 since. But they were like, you have the surgery, you're there for this period of time that you expect, and then you leave. So she had a lot of doctor's appointments, but she really didn't have a lot of hospitalizations. I think she was hospitalized like once a year since she was born with RSV. But other than that, she mostly was pretty healthy. And honestly, the pandemic was probably really helpful for that because she was just home for quite a while. But she had always gone to daycare and still was always fairly healthy. But I think a lot of that was she was small enough that she was still pretty strong. She could manage her body. So she was doing more physically than she is now. But after Andy was born is really when she started getting hospitalized. So over the last, Andy just turned 3, but over the last 18 months, she's been hospitalized 15 times. Yeah. So, and most of those were in the intensive care unit, and some of those were for over 2 weeks, and some of those were a step down from intubation. So she's been really, really sick. Others were only one night, but it's just been a lot of that. And the hardest part of it is not necessarily the hospitalization and managing all that. It's Andy. So that's kind of the part that we didn't expect with bringing a sibling into her life. I don't know. We probably should have. But like, she feels it so deeply when her sister's not there. So that's a part that we've really had to kind of work with and just be very clear with her about, like, this is exactly what's going to happen. This is who's going to be where when. This is who's picking you up. And she does so much better with that. And then
to give her the structure, communicate with her what's going on.
And sometimes we're able to sneak her into the hospital to see her sister and know she's okay. All depends on who's in charge at the hospital that day. But that's really good for her too, just to see that Sissy's all right. Like,
And she doesn't want to be there either. So she's usually only
Right.
there like 5 or 10 minutes, but it's enough.
It's a reassurance,
Yes,
right? It's
completely.
like it's settling her own
Those little pieces.
response, right? Because she kept in the dark.
Yes.
And I think even if you and Matt were to say like, oh, she's little, she doesn't understand, it doesn't really give her enough credit.
No.
Like she's perceiving.
And she does understand.
Yeah, of course
she
she does.
understands more than she should probably.
That's right.
And she is. We've always kept her very involved, but also kept her very aware. So we've always been very honest with her. Like both of our dogs passed away in the last year, and she still to this day says, "Where's Tyus?" And we say, "He's dead, honey. He died." Like we just are very honest with her because there's going to be in her life a lot of very honest and hard conversations that need to be had. And so right from the beginning, we've always set that up. But we've also really focused on, prioritizing her in ways. Just this weekend, she went shopping with me on Saturday. So we ran all sorts of errands and went grocery shopping, and she got to pick out something special at each of the places. And I mean, it was literally just a very mundane Saturday, like things I needed to do, like UPS and the dollar store and Walmart. But she did all of it with me, and it just let her kind of go out and do something that kids do, like something normal. And her sister didn't have to be there, so there wasn't extra special like attention needing to be paid anywhere, and it could just be her and I spending time together. We take her to a gym class every week, and Matt really prioritizes doing that with her. It's like his special thing that he does with her. So we really just try to pay attention to her and her interests and make sure that we pique those interests and really let her feel like an individual and special outside of Emmy, because so much of our life does have to revolve around Emmy. But with all of those hospitalizations came, the need to switch careers. So I have wanted to be a teacher as long as I can remember. I don't remember ever mentioning any career other than being a teacher. I know in 4th grade or 5th grade, we did this like careers project, and mine was I was going to be a teacher, and then I was going to be a poet. I don't know where that part came from because that's not coming, but I was going to be a teacher. I've always wanted that. And so I did, and I went through college and got my degree, and then I got my master's degree in just 10 months so I could be ready to start full force and get started right away. And I did, and I taught for 10 years, and I taught in a district I loved, and I taught grades that I loved, and I worked my way, from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th to 6th, right to the sweet spot where I wanted to be at the school I wanted to be at the school that was my kid's neighborhood school, 2 minutes from my house, on the same campus as where Emmy's kindergarten was going to be, like everything that I thought was going to align with our life. But then 2 things happened. One, Emmy did a pretty bad, her worst ever hospital stay of 2 weeks in the ICU on the highest level of breathing support without being intubated. And when the 2 weeks were up, usually when we're in a hospitalization, Matt and I are both very we're in it, right? Like it's go mode. There's no real outside thinking. It's just what has to happen. Now what has to happen. Now what has to happen. And so, we just worked through it. But then when she came home is usually when at least for me, the first couple of days are like, whew.
It's exhausting.
Yeah,
I mean, you're talking about being in a fight or flight response while she's in the hospital for 2 weeks.
Exactly.
That's an incredibly long time to be at that level of stress.
And with a 1-year-old at the time.
Yeah, and you're still working as a teacher.
Yeah. And so I realized when we came home from that hospitalization that, she was there for 2 full weeks, and I didn't miss a day of school.
Right.
I taught every lesson. I was not absent a single day. And I was like, wow, like that makes me feel really horrible as a mom, that I feel like I prioritized my career, not my kid. Like, who would do that? Like, I had so much like negative self-talk. Like, I can't believe you're that bad of a mom that you spent all that time with your students instead. And then I got thinking about it, and I was like, I think I really just can't have clientele that I love as much as my own kids. And that was it. Like, I was so passionate about teaching and about my students that I chose them over her in those moments. And she was always taken care of. There was always somebody with her. My in-laws would come in and help out at the hospital so we could go to work and that kind of thing. Like, I was always managing all the schedules to make sure everything was okay.
Right.
But I realized that I wasn't like, I'd go spend the night at the hospital with her and then go in and teach. And I just
you weren't being you, right? Like it sounds like you weren't being true to
care of her. Yeah.
But you weren't being true to yourself, right? So it's like, I can go in, I can do my job. I can do my job for her. I can make sure that she has the right, like, you know, logistical supports, and then I can go in and I can teach and I can be engaged with the kids and I can really feel fulfilled in this world. But I'm not being like, it seems like you had to have that moment of self-reflection where you're like, this is not lining up with who I actually am.
Exactly.
Like I'm compromising my core value to perform or to be successful, to live up to expectations. But by doing that, I'm failing myself.
Right. And that's really what I felt. And everyone around us was so supportive. Like my job, my principals, my team, they were all amazing and helpful. My own students, like I was just always, and even when I had your kids, like they always knew what was going on in my life.
Yep.
Because I felt like they needed to, so that way they could understand if I did have to run out or if I did have to, you know, be out for a couple of days, or if Emmy had a surgery and I was the more that I could teach them about her and let them in on what was happening in my life with regards to her, the more like support I got from them in a weird spot of like knowing I wasn't coming back to a horrible sub note, right? That I then had to deal with. And
I think even for middle schoolers, it was so important to me as a mom, hearing those stories that they'd come home with, that they were building empathy for you and for Emmy, where it's like not just this typical life that they were accustomed to, that other people have other things going on and this is what their life looks like. And
I always told the parents too, like at the curriculum night, like this is what my life looks like, just so you know. Like I love being here with your kids, but I just want you to know what home is like, so that way everybody is kind of on the same page. I just find transparency like so important. And so I always did that too, but I just came to realize that like even though everyone was supportive and on board and willing to do whatever needed to be done to make this all work for our family, like it wasn't working for me. And so that's when I started to look into a career change and made the change, because it always felt like if I was at the hospital with Emmy during the day, I was wasting time, because I could be there for her, but I couldn't teach from there. I couldn't really grade papers that were being done in the moment from there. I was just sitting there, sitting next to her, not doing anything. And for someone who's like constantly on the go, and I mean, I would think about, I could be restocking her meds at home. I could be restocking her supplies. Like, but I'm just sitting here. It felt like such a waste. But in my heart, that was where I wanted to physically be.
Sure.
And so that was the real mess for me, I think. And so really what I was looking for, and I just put it out there as full transparency, was somewhere that I could be Emmy's mom when she needed me to be there with her physically, but also still be me and able to work, because I don't do well just sitting there all day doing nothing, which is why I was choosing not to, right? And so what I love about what I'm doing now is wherever I have my laptop, I can work. Wherever I have my phone, I can work. And so that's in the emergency department, that's in the ICU, that's, wherever. And also like, it can be not. Like if I can't right now, I just can't right now. Or if, on Wednesday, Emmy has an appointment in the middle of the day. Emmy has an appointment in the middle of the day. I never could do midday appointments because I'd have to take the full day off of school and figure all of that out. And Matt was incredible while I was teaching. And I mean, he's still incredible. That's not what I mean. But he did almost all of the daytime hospitalization stuff. He did almost all of the daytime appointments. He did like all of that stuff. So that way I could prioritize being at school. And he's always had a super, his employers that he's had over the years have been very supportive and understanding and allowed him to work from wherever he needed to. But it's been great to be able to share that burden with him, but still have my identity and do what I need to do. Because not only financially do I need to work to contribute, but mentally, like my brain needs that purpose outside of my family.
Absolutely. And I think that what I felt from you when we initially connected to talk about, what you could do for the counseling practice, I was like, I don't have a role for you. I don't really have a budget for you, but I loved that you were so vulnerable and honest. I also knew your skill set and your capabilities, as a person and what you would be able to bring to any job that you would be in.
Right.
And I think for anybody to have that courage and the strength and the vulnerability all at the same time, to put it out there to say, hey, I'm leaving this career. I don't know if it's permanent, but I know that it's for right now. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
And I would say too, my own bias as an employer and having a couple of moms that, work with us who have kids with disabilities, it's recognizing that there's not a need to micromanage, that the other woman who works with us, it's like people step up to the plate.
Right.
And in many ways, you are stronger, more resilient, more flexible, more adaptable than anyone who doesn't have to go through all of those things.
Yeah.
Right. So it's making space, I think, for people to figure out what it is that they need to do. So when Emmy's in the hospital and you're like, hey, I'm working from the hospital today, just a heads up. I'm like, okay, are you
You're always
okay?
like, are you sure?
Are you
don't
okay?
need to.
I'm like,
no, I do need to.
Yeah. I'm like, we can reschedule this meeting. It's fine. You're like, nope, I'll be there. I need a break. And it's like, okay, I need to, as your employer, I need to just trust you that you will tell me what you need.
Right.
And that's our dynamic.
Yes.
And so it's worked incredibly well. So for other employers, I would even recommend and advocate for them to have honest conversations with parents who are navigating this process to say like, hey, what do you need from me? This is what I need from you. And obviously in all systems, that's not going to work. Right? So leaving teaching was something that I know was really painful, but necessary for you because that system didn't work.
Yes.
But there are other systems that do.
Right.
So I know that brings us right back to where we started. And I know we're out of time, but tell us, like, if you could give that past version of you, to give her a message, that 20-something, who was navigating this, what would you say? What would you want her to know?
I think really just that, like, it's not going to look the way that you want it to look, right? Like nothing is going to look that way, but finding joy in the little moments, finding ways to make things work and ways to involve Emmy in the community and in the world, in ways that are meaningful and helpful to her and that she enjoys, and where other people can experience her and the joy she brings will become kind of your life's compass, like the direction that you go.
And she finds her own space in that, and so do you too.
Totally.
Like, quickly, can you tell everybody about the SU women's hockey team?
Yeah, so Emmy is a huge sports fan, and so we signed her up for Team Impact right when she turned 5, which is when they first start using the program or allowing the program. And actually, when we signed her up, they were like, are you sure you want to do it now? Because it's only a 2-year commitment and she's so young. And I was like, we don't know what her life looks like. You're like, yes, we are going to capture the moment right now. And she got paired with the SU women's ice hockey team, and they have just more than taken her right in. Like, they love her. We go to every game. Emmy loves it. She's obsessed. Anderson knows all the players by name. She watches their welcome videos from August. Like, literally, she was watching it this morning. She watches them over and over on the iPad.
She's involved too.
Yeah, she's fully involved. They had a full day about Emmy and raising awareness about CASK. They're actually going to volunteer at her elementary school this spring after the season ends.
And SU is Syracuse University.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking D1 major sports.
Yeah, these
incredible
girls
athletes.
they're incredible. They're mostly Canadian, but they're incredible.
Well, and Team Impact is one example of a resource that I know your family uses. There are lots of different resources that you tap into.
Yeah, David's Refuge is another one. It's huge. They've been so supportive to us, and we do a lot of giving back to them at this point, of hosting other people on retreats and things. And the others is just really leaning on your local moms and dads who have already been there, because they know the supports that are out there in our community and broader for specifically you.
Right.
But outside of that, like, my biggest piece of advice I think to everyone is, like, be transparent with everyone about your life as far as, like, what you need, because that's the only way that I, like, found this opportunity and career switch and all of that, and have more balance in my life than I think I ever had.
It sounds like you were also open to accepting what it is that you needed in order to be now in this life that you didn't ever expect to have.
Yeah. And for employers of, rare disease parents or parents with kids with disabilities or anything really, like, just having those open community. I love the new trend lately of, like, I'm paying you to do this job, right?
Yeah.
Like, do this job how you need to do it and take good care of it, and, do your part and we'll do our part. And that's so helpful to families like mine, because I can do what I need to do when I need to do it and still be a meaningful contribution to the world and a business, and
my own family. And
Yes.
that's huge. Like I'm invested because my employer's invested, and that makes a big deal.
And I know from the employer standpoint that that's absolutely, it's easier and it works better for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So if people want to know more about CASK, support CASK, David's Refuge is another nonprofit that our practice works with a lot.
We love them. They're wonderful.
Yeah, they provide support for caregivers, respite, right? So we provide mental health counseling services for them.
Yeah.
Have done that for 6-7 years at this point.
Yeah.
So lots of different resources in the community. So if people want to find out more about the resources, where would you direct them?
Definitely your local disabilities Facebook page is going to have people that you can connect with best for your specific situation. For more about CASK, I would check out projectcask.org. They are definitely a great foundation who's doing amazing things with fantastic information.
Believe
Well has been a really great, it's a New York based only grant program. Look at that. It's We Believe in a Cure, I think is what the full organization is called. But they're really great too. And other than that, I think it's just, talking and telling your story to a sense, because it gets you these connections that you weren't necessarily expecting or looking for, but can be really beneficial.
Well, I've got to thank you for being who you are, but also for being here, for sharing the stories that have shaped you in your life, both leading up to being a mom and this life that you never expected, but truly being a gift to other people, where I'm hoping that listeners will be able to recognize the strength and the grace that you have as you approach this and find something in it that they can grasp onto to say, okay, you know what? It's not at all the life that I expected that I would have, but I'm grateful that I'm in it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And what do I need to have that?
And find that joy in anywhere you can find it.
That's right.
And that's what we do.
Well, Christine,
So thank
you.
Yes. Thanks.